Questions from the floor? I've given some ideas as to where we might go in a dialogue, but I want your ideas as well. There's a waving hand up there I can see. Somebody has a microphone, I assume. Wave again. Didn't match the microphone. We'll try and collect a couple of questions and then take answers from the panel.
Thank you. My name is Ida Augen. I'm a member of the Danish Parliament. I would like to ask you, how do we get the businesses that do not directly benefit from a clear framework, for instance, and a carbon tax, clear emission targets, how do we get those businesses to actually cooperate? Because, I mean, when we have a report like the one we had in Denmark yesterday, I don't hear clear signals from businesses that do not directly benefit from this. How do we get them to also cooperate? Because that would be easier for us as politicians to actually set this framework if we weren't always shut down by business leaders who think this is a really bad idea. So please answer that question. That would be very nice to hear from you. Thank you.
Anyone else dare to take the floor after that? Here's another waving one. See, we're getting the gender distribution under control here now.
Hello, this is Helle Djule, Alstom Power. We have provided equipment for 25% of electricity capacity in the world today. We're global leaders within the hydropower and have a number of good technologies on our list. I in particular want to address a question to Anders Eldrup because I was a bit puzzled by you naming, I think you referred to a report by Energy Net DK, but you said scarcity of fossil fuels within the next 30 and 40 years. Now we're naming this conference World Climate Solutions, and clearly many of our customers, South Africans, Indians, Chinese, they have no scarcity in coal at all. So we see it very differently, being very difficult for them to meet challenging targets, CO2 reductions, if there isn't a solution for clean coal, such as CCS, which is one of our major investment points. So could you elaborate on that? You compared it to offshore wind as well and the costs, and we have different figures, I believe, but I'd be happy to discuss.
We'll take one more question and then you people can, okay, you can answer that one.
No, I'll just take a pencil.
One more. Oh, come on. I thought men could multitask. Okay, Henrik had a question here. Henrik Bindslev.
Henrik Bindslev, Risø, DTU. I have a question to really all of the panel. That is, how does the shale gale, that is the sudden emergence of economically retrievable gas in massive amounts, such that the US apparently now has sufficient gas for its own consumption. How does that challenge us when we really do want to roll out on a massive scale sustainable energies, and we want to do that in a marketplace where the renewables are competitive? We've already seen that the price of gas is dropping, and that means that in one way of looking at it, this is a massive challenge for the agenda that we have just set us in Denmark to shift 100% to renewables. But could it also be one where we say it's easy to get halfway because gas and wind go well together, but it's going to be very difficult to make the last part of the transition because now we have stranded assets in terms of huge investments in gas?
Okay. That were the first three questions. There was one specifically to Anna, so he can start, but then otherwise I'd like to hear the whole panel on the other two questions.
Yes, thank you. This was a question about pricing on the fossil fuels in the future. The point is, if you look 40 years ahead, we know, as we have heard also Ted telling, that the consumption of energy will increase dramatically. We become much more people and they will consume more and more because they become richer and richer and live in urban circumstances. So it's a fact of life that consumption, demand for energy will increase dramatically. And I think almost everybody who analyzes this comes to the conclusion due to that prices looking 30, 40 years ahead, prices on the fossil fuels will increase. Of course you can argue how much and how less, but I think everybody comes to the conclusion that the price of fossil fuels, be it coal, gas, oil, whatever, will increase over the time horizon. Compared to that, you have the wind turbines. Costly to establish, but the price of wind will be the same for 30 years, for 40 years, because it's free all through. And this analysis I pointed to shows that these two lines will cross each other. Starting point, the price of wind is more expensive, but when you take into account that the fuel for the fossil plants will increase, then at some time in history, it can be 20 years ahead, it can be whatever, then it will be more cheap to go by the renewables with the prices we know of today. So that is actually the argument that we should use, because this is a societal cost of it. In the short run, we must accept to pay an extra price, and we should do that because in the longer run, it's a cheaper solution.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Now there was the question about the fact that in revolutions, as I said, there are winners and losers, and many of the winners don't even exist yet, so they're not making a lot of noise, but some of the losers know who they're going to be, and they're making an awful lot of noise. Now what do we do about that, guys?
Yeah, I'd almost like to answer that question not as a business leader, but as somebody with a background in economics. Nobody has ever said that the policy framework is immaterial. Policy framework is absolutely vital for the direction of resources, for the direction of action. And I mean, nobody can take that from us. So it's not like, I mean, of course we need an alliance of businesses to tackle innovation issues, and we need markets to solve lack of innovation and sort out the ones that are not innovative enough. But if it comes to the ones that are not bothered by something that a market addresses, then policy framework is key. I mean, have you heard lately about the ozone layer thing? I suppose not, because the ozone layer hole is closing. Why is it closing? Because there was a worldwide ban on the stuff that destroyed it in the first place. And it was absolutely clear that the policy framework made sure that that happens. Now that's an extreme example where policy really had a grip. My plea is that the variables that need to register in business models need to be made endogenous, so inside the relevant business models, and that's the long and the short of it. And that is a policy task, not a business task. Because businesses, and we all know that, do react to incentive and disincentive and fiscal or other mechanisms of directing do definitely show a grip, in my view, if you take statistics and if you take examples for that. So I firmly believe, and there's plenty of proof for that you can make this agenda also the agenda of the ones that don't immediately see the benefit of it. That would be my answer to that. And the other one, the second question, if I may quickly say that, because you pointed rightfully out that we're in a lot of business fields, so oil and gas would be one of them. The gas findings and also the technology they use now to extract gas and liquid gas in a completely different way is of course an issue and is a market issue, and it will be clearly such that there is a competition between the price of fossil fuels and the price of renewable energy in the broadest sense, solar, wind, whatever, biomass. And that is also a question that needs to be answered along the way. I mean, I'm certain that we will continuously see use of fossil fuels because of the fact that despite the increase in the consumption that undoubtedly takes place, we will have also increased offering and no real scarcity of fossil fuels. So if you want to divvy the problem up into what do we do to have energy security and what do we have to do in terms of climate change agenda, those are two different issues in my view that need to be addressed separately.
Okay. Maybe on the first question, coming back on how to motivate the potential losers. I mean, I think we are all now as a company also looking more and more to the so-called triple bottom line, meaning it's a matter of profit, but it's also a matter of sustainability and so on. So that would be also part of that aspect for these companies. Because at the end of the day, we are out in the markets competing not only for customers, but also for talent and also for investors. So the more I can sell also the good aspect of the company, working on the environment, I might also be able to attract better talent. And with having better people, I will also move the company further. Furthermore, I will attract also better investors. you see more and more investors today focusing not only on the profitability of the company and the sustainability of it, but on the environment impact and the way these companies behave. So that is also a way to attract and to motivate people, to lift this kind of focus and not to focus only on the short term or on the profit of the company. Now, additionally to that, the regulation part, I would think about motivating the one who have the biggest challenge, maybe balancing between percentages improvement and absolute improvements, so that the poor guys who start from very far down the road might be also rewarded the way he improve in percentage and maybe less in terms of absolute figures. So that is also a way to balance the reward around that. The second question, should I take now or later?
If you have more to say, do it now.
I have some ideas on the shale gas. I tend to agree that shale gas might slow down the implementation of renewables because it is a very attractive alternative which is now popping up in US. On the other side, as I mentioned in my speech earlier, one of the big challenges we have in the CO2 emission is the efficiency. As you know, between the time you extract the raw material from the soil to the time you use it, you have lost 80% of it. In other words, you use only at the end of the day 20% of what you extract out of the soil. So 80% being lost, whatever you can reduce at 80% will improve massively. We will not come to a fossil-free kind of economy, but at least we will reduce massively the CO2 emission. The shale gas is, for that, not such a bad solution because you have a distributed network and then you can shorten these logistic chains so massively that you generate per energy you extract a lot of the CO2 emission over the total value chain. So yes, it's not a perfect solution, but at least it's much better than a lot of other solutions we have today. So maybe we need to take a step in between. I would not be so completely negative on that.
Do you have something to add? Yeah.
Yeah, just very brief. I think most of it had been said. But of course, it's clear that fossil fuel will be an important part of the base load for years to come. I think the most important issue is that we start to make the transition that needs to happen. And therefore, I think that's really where we need to focus on and have our focus there. So, and of course, there will need to be discussions with those involved in it. But I think one issue that is important to say, Katherine talked about the consumers. They are, of course, very important. But I would at least say for all the statistics we are making, look out for the youth.
Mikkel, did you have something to add?
I think most have been said. I think what's important to take into consideration also is that it's a lifetime cost perspective. I'm sure the fossil fuels will be more expensive, and if they don't, I think we should make sure they become more expensive to continue the transition in order to do that. And on the other side,
fighting words I found out yesterday.
And on the other side, I think it also takes more information about what's in it. Green transition is not necessarily a loss game. We have in our CO2 reduction plan in the Village Group, we have an investment plan to reduce by 20% in 2012. We have a roadmap to reduce by 50% in 2020. And we have an investment of 400 million Danish kroner to get there. And it's all paid back. It might not be in the usual short-term business case return that we look at when we evaluate business cases, but it might be 6 or it might be 8 years. But it comes back, and in the long term, it works.
Super.